First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm very excited about this opportunity to learn from you and to share your journey with others. Could you start by introducing yourself, who you are, where you're from?
Okay, well, Manny, thank you very much for having me here. I just love having the opportunity to share my story, bits and pieces, to get it out there and hopefully inspire someone out there. So my name is Steve Mellon. I was born in Minnesota, but pretty much raised in California for my entire life. I had brought out here by a single mother and raised in the South Bay area of California in San Jose prior to being adopted. And I was adopted at age 2 into a family that was close by, but was a bit better off and more stable than what my biological family was. So my main roots are in the Bay Area. Mom was a teacher and dad was an electrical engineer at Stanford. And so I kind of got an upgrade in life without even knowing it, just as a little 1-2-year-old child. So I now live in the Bay Area still. I'm in Marin County, and I have a wife and 2 children, stepson and daughter, and they're both freshmen in high school. And I'm a mentor and a board member for Debbie's Dream Foundation, which brings me to the story of my stomach cancer journey.
So first of all, thank you so much for sharing your beginnings, right? And certainly the tough situation that your biological mother must have been in to give you up.
And I'm still in touch with my biological parents, even though both of my adoptive parents have passed away. They both had heart attacks in their 50s. So wild ride, but it's a journey that got me to where I am today.
Absolutely. And so we jumped over quite a bit of your background. We went from, when you were born to today, basically. But something happened in between there. And you talk about it on the Debbie's Dream website. It happened in 2007. Could you talk to us about what was your life like right before experienced what you did? And we can go from there.
Okay, well, I was just in this phase of life that the world was so open. I had all these opportunities. I was fairly newly married for a couple of years, looking to have a child, and mid to upper 30s at that time, and thinking both of us working. We had the things in life. We had a house, we had a nice car, we had the opportunity to travel, and both working very hard, and in this phase where we thought nothing would really slow us down. The first time that I really felt that I had an issue, looking back, I was on a company club trip with my ex-wife at the time. We were on the Great Wall of China. So we were on a wonderful experience traveling, and I can't make it up the wall. I am in my 30s, and I'm just out of breath. I'm weak. And all these people that appear to be less physical condition than I am, because I grew up as an athlete, and I just said, I need to take a break. I can't make it up the wall here. Why don't you guys go ahead? I'm just tired from the flight over to Beijing. So they all go up, they come back down, they tell me about it. They told me they got great pictures. Well, that was the first sign of me vocalizing that I had an issue that was something I probably should have paid more attention to.
And that's interesting to me. So I've been to the Great Wall, and so how far did you make it? Because you could actually go pretty far along the wall. So how far did you make it?
I didn't make it very far. There are these turrets that you can stop at, and I remember there was this one last final section where there was a turret that I could sit, and I'm like, and then there was another. It was like a couple hundred yards up, and I said, you know what? You guys go up that, and I'm going to sit in the turret and take pictures from here. And that's kind of where I stopped. So I made it pretty far, but not all the way to the top. And so when I got back after that trip, that's when I asked the doctor, there's something wrong. I'm just tired. And he said, well, there's stress in your life with your new job and whatnot. So we have my daughter, and when I was 36, 37 years old, right after she was born, a few months after she was born, I started to feel symptoms of just discomfort in my abdomen area. And I didn't think it was much. I went to my primary care physician. The physician thought it was stress because I had a new baby in the house. I just switched to a new job after 14 years. I had a remodel going on at my house. I was doing all of these things at once that would be naturally stressful on their own. But I just pile them all on. And my doctor says, you're in your 30s, you got a lot going on. It's just stress. Well, they gave me some protonics. That's supposed to help with just alleviating the reflux that I was having. The protonics I did for several months, and so when that didn't help, I went back again, and they thought I may have had an ulcer or something because of the stress. Checked for all blood work, checked for ulcers. That came back negative again. Well, the third time, I was having this pain that was just not going away and very sharp in my upper abdomen stomach area, and I ended up couldn't get to my doctor because it was too early in the morning, and I'd stayed up all night tossing and turning, and finally went to the emergency room just because I figured I would get some sort of answer. That emergency room visit started out with a chest scan, then blood work. The blood work showed that I was anemic. Then they did an endoscopy, saw a mass, and then the mass was a 5-centimeter mass at the junction of my stomach and esophagus. And right there, they said, I have cancer. I need to do something about it pretty quickly. So that was my initial, here we go. And that was in January of, that was 2 weeks before my 38th birthday, in January of 2008.
So describe that sharp pain so that folks who may experience it, they know what to look for. What did that feel like it, and how severe was it? Because you went to the ER, so it must have been.
Yeah, well, I had that pain off and on, and it started to hurt more and more as it was a sharp pain that, especially when I ate things, like something would get stuck or it would hurt in one little area. And being young and wild and free like I was, I could have a glass of wine, and that would soften the tissues there, and it would allow me not to feel that pain as much, and I would be able to end up having food or whatever. So I started to self-medicate with alcohol because that's how food ended up going down. And I had already gone to the doctor, and they said it wasn't anything, it was just stress. So I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to go to the doctor a third time until it just got to be too much. And that sharp pain, it's right basically where like my rib cage connects to right below my rib cage. It's just in that area right there. There's just a circle right there. And the pain would come and go. It wasn't constant, but my weakness was constant. So that's because I was anemic without really knowing how anemic I was. So
And describe anemic as weakness, and I've heard others describe it as fatigue. How would you characterize it for folks? Just and how persistent was it, and in retrospect, was that a more severe sign than you would have thought?
There were 3 signs that I really should have paid attention to more clearly. One was the fatigue, but I had a life, and I still do, that is go, 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 go. It's always on the go. And so when I'm not going, I feel like I just want to sit back and relax and do nothing. So it was kind of all or nothing. So I kind of justified the fatigue as just, I'm very, very busy. Then there was the sharp pain that was there. And then the third, which was hard for me to correlate to this, was weight loss. I had gained weight while my wife was pregnant with her. We would sit and eat pizza and sit around, and I think I was at the highest weight that I had ever was. So I was up to, I'm 6'1", and I was up to about 182, 184 pounds. That was the most I had ever weighed. So after my daughter was born, we're only talking, these symptoms started 6 months after she was born. Well, I started to lose weight, and I lost, let's just say, 15 plus pounds. So that weight loss is something I should have paid attention to. If you have unexplained weight loss, which I thought I had explained weight loss, but it really just happened pretty drastically. That was another sign. So those 3 things were all symptoms that kind of, I had a justification for all of them because of the stress and whatever. And I was so young that they didn't anticipate this to happen, but really I should have paid more attention to those symptoms.
And 15 pounds doesn't sound like a lot, but over what period of time?
Probably 6 months. So probably right around 6 months, I lost about 15 pounds. And it probably went down to about 20. I probably lost 20 pounds, 20 plus pounds by the time the actual surgery happened.
And you had done nothing differently from a diet perspective or exercise perspective?
No, everything was the same. I hadn't done it. I hadn't worked out. I hadn't done anything else that was new. And so that weight loss is a big contributing sign that people need to pay attention to.
Thank you. Thank you. So you mentioned an endoscopy. Is that uncomfortable, difficult, painful? Just so folks know.
Well, now that I've had probably 15 of them, okay, since then, but as my first one, I had no idea what it was. I literally went into this not knowing anything about any cancer or anything. I mean, I've had relatives pass from different cancers, but when I was younger, I never really paid attention to what they were going through. I was young and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So now for me, the endoscopy they basically knock you out, put a camera down and take pictures down your esophagus and throat and as far down as they can really go. And then you wake up and you have some discomfort and pain because they had a camera down there, but the endoscopies were not really that bad. It was just what they were finding was bad. So yeah, I've had quite a few of them since.
Sure. So not something to be scared of from a procedure perspective.
Not at all. I wouldn't be scared of the endoscopy. Those things are fairly easy. I think, people get afraid of being knocked out. Like now I'm very familiar with the process of getting the propofol and exactly when I go under and then what they do and the pain, or sometimes endoscopies aren't always painful. It depends on how far they go. Sometimes you don't even know really that anything happened. So that's not something I would be afraid of going forward again.
And so you find out you have cancer. Emotionally, what are you thinking at the time? How are you processing? You have a daughter. What's going on for you in your mind as you process this?
Well, in the back of my mind, it was really what I'll say. It was an oh shit moment. Like it really was just, I have cancer. Those words. And at the time, my ex-wife I was married at the time, but now she's my ex. She was out of town and flying back home. So I had to relay the information via text or phone. And so I had several friends come and visit me in the hospital. And the initial thought was that I had pancreatic cancer because my pancreas was swollen as well. So I did not know the severity of any of these cancers, and I didn't Google anything. I just said, my friends would come visit me in the hospital, and I'd say, looks like I have pancreatic cancer or some form of cancer. And I would see the look on their face, and the looks on their faces said a lot more. And I, trying to stay positive and trying to avoid the reality of how bad this possibly could be, tried to say, oh, I'll deal with this. I can handle it. This is, I'll do whatever they say and I'll just follow the rules and the treatments. But little did I know how many different treatments and how much they'd have to do and how rapidly they'd have to start doing this process. So I would say that I didn't really break down until I finally had the plan. And it was my birthday. They wanted to do the surgery on my birthday, which was January 30th. And I told the doctors at Stanford, I said, no, you can't do this because I don't want my death day and my birthday to be the same day. That's not how I want my story to go. So they pushed it off and did it a week later. So I was able to celebrate my birthday with a big group of friends. We went bowling and went to a Mexican restaurant and had tequila. And, it was just one of these parties. But I stood up in front of all my friends. There's probably 30 people that showed up, and I broke down in tears, and I said, I'm scared. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm thankful that you're here with me. I appreciate your love and support, but I'm really scared right now. And that's kind of the first time that I broke down about the whole thing, really. And I had this opportunity in public in front of all my friends. And then it was basically put my head down, go do the steps, go into the hospital, and do whatever they say that I need to do. And that didn't go as smoothly as I thought it would.
And so that opportunity to face it down, to celebrate with friends, right? 30 friends, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That sounds like a moment of immense love and support. Could you describe what you felt at that moment?
It gave me the strength to move forward. We all kind of need something, whatever it is. I had a daughter at the time and a wife, to live for. I had immense support from my friends. I lost both my parents, so I didn't have parents. So it was really that core group of people that all took the time to come and be with me, and just tell it how much. And they were all crying. I'm crying. They're crying. Everyone's crying, and I'm going, oh, and support was coming from all over the country, from my friends from college, from elementary school. So I believe there is an incredible power in absorbing that kind of energy, whatever it is. And I pulled that energy into myself and used it. And I think it helped heal or helped defend off bad things that potentially could have made things worse. I think there's an incredible power there that I really can't explain when it comes to love and support from people that care for you. And I don't go out asking for support at all. I don't want to be the one who's like, hey, look at me, I'm in pain. I really like to avoid that if possible, but I got a lot of support.
So that's amazing to me because you described this experience, and I've talked to other folks, and some folks are hesitant to share, right? Something that is so profound and deeply challenging. But you're saying you almost took it the opposite. Everyone knew. It sounds like. How did your work respond? You were working.
People didn't really know how to react to that. So, being a financial advisor, working at this firm, they hadn't experienced many people, especially even in my office. I know at the company because there's a lot of people, but not in my office. They didn't know what to do because the protocol was that it was going to be a week. I was going to go into the surgery. I'd be out in a week, and I could go back to working part-time remotely in the office, but working remotely from home. And that's what the plan was. They didn't put me on any disability. They didn't put me on any other. It was just, okay, I'm going in. And I tried to make less of a deal than it was too. I didn't want to say, well, there's a 5% chance that I may die on the operating table, along with all these other risks that can happen. And my stage 3B cancer, there's only a 15% chance of surviving 5 years or more. So I didn't know all these numbers really at the time. And I was just going to go and do what I had to do. I told my company, I'm going to go into surgery. I'll be back. It'll be about a week. And here we go. Well, it didn't work that way. I think every obstacle came my way when it came to going through this next couple steps, because they wanted this surgery. They wanted it done pretty quickly. I had 3 separate opinions. The opinions were different from different hospitals. One wanted to do chemo and radiation first and then go do surgery. The other 2 wanted to do surgery first and then chemo and radiation. So I had to make a decision. And the only reason I chose Stanford was because there was another hospital that had a similar protocol, and my father and uncle both went to Stanford and got their master's and PhD in electrical engineering there. And I always wanted to go to Stanford, but I could never get in. So I said, I'm going to Stanford and I'm going to go in through the hospital. So it was my joke and my way of lightening things up. Why when and I got to talk to the top surgeon who was going to be doing my surgery. So I felt I was in as good a hands as I could possibly be.
Oh, absolutely. And for folks, stage 3B, what does that mean?
Well, you don't want to hear the word stage 4. That's your, but they're staged in stage, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this means that when you get to stage 3, it means it is spread to nearby or through the walls and almost spread to different organs. Not quite fully, because mine was in the lymph nodes as well. So I had, I think, 15 lymph nodes that they had to scrape out that they were impacted. They thought it was in the pancreas, but it wasn't. It was the lymph nodes that were just swelling up the pancreas. And so they ended up taking out my entire stomach, my spleen, half my pancreas, a third of my esophagus. And so the surgery ended up being much more major than they initially planned. But the the stage 3 part just means it's spread further, and that they have to really go in aggressively and make sure it doesn't get through your lymphatic system and go to other organs. But fortunately, it was only through the walls. It wasn't through to other organs.
And so finding out that you had to have these many organs affected, what was the conversation that you had about what the future could look like? Did you know how your eating ability would be impacted, etc., beforehand?
First off, I didn't know my spleen was coming out until I signed the paperwork right before getting my chest shaved to go into the surgery. I didn't even know what the spleen really did. I didn't know how my eating would be. I did have one individual that I'd met through, and we had started Gastric Cancer Foundation, which was a separate foundation. I had met JP Gallagher, and he had the same surgeon, the same oncologist, the same age as me, and I was just 3 months behind him. So he was the only person who kind of gave me any insight into what I'd be experiencing, but he only had a 3-month runway ahead of me to give me and he seemed to be doing pretty well, it was very promising, except for the fact that he said the gas that he had was death defying. He said, he was doing all right, showed me his scars, and he was able to eat certain things, and I used him as sort of my guiding light at first, of course, until he died later. So, but that I didn't have any real nutritionists to tell me how I would handle the new plumbing, because it's completely different. There's no stomach. I've got to give myself B12 shots to get supplements because I can't absorb them. So things they're drastically different at first, and it takes time, but I wasn't really prepared for how bad it was going to be for me.
Sure. And know where to look for the right information as well, right?
No, not 14 years ago. They just did not have the resources that they have now, or the people with the longevity that they have now that you can go to.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned the surgery. It happened, and you actually recovered, but then you had a situation happen. So could you describe that?
Okay, well, I woke up out of the surgery, and I think it was a 7 or 8 hour surgery, and I was in ICU, and I had a couple friends around with me that were in there, the few that were able to visit, and I started to kind of lose consciousness, go in and out of consciousness. And the young nurse who'd only been working there for 3 months, she noticed something was very wrong. So they brought in the main doctor, not my main doctor, but the doctor on call right then. And that doctor said, no, this stuff is normal. This gunk shooting out of his nose is normal. This feeling is normal. And she said, this is not normal. So with what I'm seeing with him, he's falling really fast. So she called a code blue. So I didn't know what a code blue was at the time, but clearly everyone goes out of the room, code blue over the microphone. All doctors come in, they reassess the situation, and the assessment at the time was that I needed to be reopened and go back into another surgery. So that's what happened. So I am wheeled out. It was just a comedy of errors. I was envisioning a movie in my head, 12 Monkeys with Brad Pitt, like I was going crazy. Bruce Willis. They couldn't get my bed into the elevator because they had put extensions on my bed, so they had to break off it was just one problem after the next. So then they knocked me out. I go into surgery, and I wake up about a week later. So
were you conscious of at least that interim period? You had woken up and you were aware that something was terribly wrong?
Yes. And I was scared. And I all of a sudden the movie scene came in my head. I was talking with my wife. I was scared, 12 monkeys, they're going to take my body. I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it, so I was panicked. And then being in ICU and knocked out for that whole week, I would come out of it a little bit. And when you come out of it, you would hear things and see things. And I was hallucinating. I thought my body parts were being taken because I kept on hearing the helicopter come in. So I had all these crazy visions that were going on in that week. And then finally, when I came out of it at the end, I'm strapped to the bed with my ankles and my arm and my head, and I have a 24-hour nurse sitting next to me, and I'm going, what's going on? And they said, you're not going to try to break out, are you? And I go, no, because I had tried to tear everything out while I was unconscious, I guess. And so they unhooked me and said, yeah, you've been out for a week, and they had to reseal everything, and we're just hoping that that connection holds. So then I had to go through a couple weeks of testing to make sure that connection held.
By connection, you literally mean the reconnected organ system. What was connected to what now?
So the small intestine was brought up and connected to my remaining esophagus, and that's where I'd sprung a leak. And that's where all the pain meds and everything they were injecting in me were going into my body cavity. That's why I started to lose consciousness through that. But that was, so then I've got the catheters, nose, neck. It was a tough scene. But if I can share one experience that was actually quite overwhelming in that next day or so, I had a client that showed up, and I was completely unprepared to see a client in the state that I was in. I had come out, I had the nose tube, I was overwhelmed with like what happened to me. I don't know what's going on. And this was an Indian gentleman, and he comes in and he sees me, and I look at him, and it was like a piece of my outside life that had come in that I wasn't prepared to see. And I just started breaking down in tears. Okay. And he comes over me. He doesn't say a thing. He just comes over to me. He puts his hand on my forehead and holds it there. And we just breathe. And I just try to calm, and I breathe, and I just breathe. And after a couple minutes, he goes and he sits down, and I look at him and I go, what did you do? What did you do? And he goes, nothing. I just was there with you, present with you. And I felt like he just pulled away all that anxiety in a moment. I mean, we were friendly, and he was a good client, but he wasn't someone that I would call and say I need help. And all of a sudden, I got this overwhelming just calming over me, and I was able to breathe and talk and then just move forward.
Wow, that is a beautiful moment of humanity. And I would reflect, you had parents, they weren't there for you. But in that moment, you had a connection to something, which it was the human experience coming through in a bit of divine. So thank you for sharing. That's
absolutely. It was something that I can't explain, and I felt that there was a divine intervention right at that moment. So that's something I'll never forget.
That is fantastic. So 30 days in the hospital.
Yes.
That sounds really tough. You're in a lot of pain. You're managing through that pain. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. So I was given copious amounts of pain meds, and through the whole process. And I had never been, whatever you want to call it, a pain pill popper or I never really took medications. Yes, I drank alcohol, but I did not medicate like that. I now am trying to get food in me. I'm prepping for chemo and radiation that is just around the corner, and they have to wait till my incisions heal somewhat, and they'd had to crack my ribs to get in. So they cracked the ribs to get in. So I had broken bones and to take everything out. So the process was the healing process took 6 weeks or so, if not more, just to ease the pain somewhat. But in that process, I was also given whatever pain meds they wanted. I mean, I had Loratab, Dilaudid, fentanyl, OxyContin, oxycodone, codeine, Percocet, whatever. I had it all. And I didn't realize how hard and how that whole addiction thing can be another problem in the whole journey of recovering from these deadly diseases. And that's a whole nother part. But for the next 4 months, I had to prep and try to gain as much weight as possible, which was impossible, before I started my chemo. And chemo was back at Stanford It was, I was at home basically just trying to get through my days and nights in intense discomfort, and go to Stanford one day a week, hook up to the IVs for 5 or 6 hours, get the IVs all pumped into me. I forgot which ones they were, oxaliplatin and 5-FU. And then I would go home and take these huge horse pills called Xylota for rest of the week. And I did that for, I don't remember exactly how many weeks it was, but maybe 8 weeks. And then in the middle of that, we crossed over with starting radiation. Radiation was a whole nother issue where, I had to go to locally and get into this chamber thing where I lie down and get zapped once a day, 5 days a week for the next 6 to 8 weeks. That was what took me down, basically. I handled the chemo better than I handled the radiation, but the nausea, the weight loss, I got down to 95 pounds at this point. So going from the surgery where I lost weight, now going through the chemo and the radiation, now we're talking 6-7 months later, and I'm 6'1", 195 pounds. I just couldn't take much more. So on my last day of radiation, I went into the doctor crying and said, I can do it, but I don't know how much more I can handle. And he said, we're done. That's it. He goes, you made it 90% of the way, but you made it way further than I thought you would make it. So congratulations. And so we ended it that day, and that was my last radiation treatment. And then I had about a month of, dry heaving and recovery from just the burning inside. Everything was just, they burned me, I guess. So now I've got 3 tattoos, little dots. I'm tattooed up with these, these little dots where they radiated, and now I'm trying to gain weight, but I'm in such pain that my pain pill use is accelerating, and that's becoming the next problem in my life.
And could you describe, because there's a lot going on, right? There's the underlying surgery,
Yes.
There's the chemotherapy, and then it's the radiation that, as you put it, took you down. Your levels of pain throughout this, and even with the painkillers that you were on, was there breakthrough pain that was ongoing, and you got to the point where you couldn't take any more. What was that like to feel that through, to get to that point, and what helps you get through to that point? Because your doctor said he didn't think you would do it, but you did.
Yeah. I think what helped me was I didn't know how bad it was going to get. I didn't have any research. I just kept on doing each step, and I could take it, and I'm like, this is terrible. This is painful. Oh my God, when is this going to end? But then when it accumulates over months, not just, a couple days, I get to the point where all right, they're still doing this. I cannot wait to pass out at night because I don't want to be awake. And waking up in the morning is the same cycle of pain and nausea and vomiting and not being able to eat. That each day was like, I'm getting through my days, but I don't know how many more of these days I can do. And so it was literally just holding on for dear life and trying to look for the little bits of progress. I might look back, I wouldn't see a difference from day to day, but I might see, a week ago I was dry heaving all day, every day, and now it's just a couple times a day. And I would look at that progress that I was making. And that's kind of what made me feel I was going in the right direction, because I really only fell off and had a handful step back moments through that recovery process. But generally speaking, if I looked at it, it was improvement. And that's what kind of kept me going, is I didn't have those, okay, we're back to step 0, or we're going to have to redo chemo. If they would have said we were going to have to go back and redo chemo or that would have been a much harder blow for me to handle. But I was seeing that I was getting through these steps. We can deal with a lot of pain. We really can. I do not like pain. I'm pretty weak when it comes to it. People say that I'm very strong when it comes to it, but I cannot stand. I would do whatever possible to avoid it. So, in my nausea periods, I got my medical marijuana card and I ate edibles, and that was the only thing that fixed me. That literally was the only thing that got me through the nausea. Every other medication that I was given was not strong enough. to handle my constant nausea all day long. So that's the one thing I did separate that my doctors approved of. But back then, you couldn't get it like you could now. You had to go to the city and get a card and get ID'd and all that stuff. It was different.
I reflect, right? Asking for pain relief, was that easy or hard? I know today it's very difficult to ask those questions, and sometimes you get denied, but back then, was it relatively easy to get the relief that you needed from medication?
I was asking all the time and getting whatever I wanted, and probably not a good thing when it comes to especially opiates like Oxycontin, because those things are, I guess it's heroin or like heroin. They got a hold of me. They got completely a hold of me, and so much so that like the detox off of that was almost worse than the other stuff that I went through. I was given a lot, and I was starting to take more than I was given too. And I got to a desperate point where I was just like, you know what? I just need pain. You people, you don't understand what I'm going through. You're complaining about this thing. And so I got very judgmental for a period of time in my life where people would complain about things that in my mind were small things. But then later on, I started to figure out that we all have our things that we're going through, and whatever it is that's important to them. And how can I don't want anyone to be able to relate directly to me, because I just want to die. Like, I don't want to kill myself, but I just don't know how much more of this I can take. But the crazy thing is now, knowing what I've been through, I would go through it all over again to be where I'm at now. So,
Sure.
That moment where I didn't want to live, got to get through that moment because life is way better after that moment when you start seeing things in color and seeing things clearly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you mentioned in your journey on the foundation website about the addiction. When did you realize you were addicted and that process of recovery? I understand very few folks actually seek help with an addiction. So
Right.
That's the question that I have for you is talk us through that piece of the journey, because it's an important one.
And the addiction thing was almost harder than the other medical stuff, because it's like a choice. Like, I can choose or I cannot choose. When I was listening to the doctors about the surgeries, I didn't say, well, yes, no, I just said, whatever, doctor, I'll do it, whatever you say. When it comes to recovery, that's the attitude you have to take. You have to say, whatever it takes, I'll do it, right? Then you can recover. But if it's so accepted out there to be able to drink alcohol and if you're in pain, to take these pills. And so it's hard to not take a pill if you've got it right there in front of you. So my addiction with the pills escalated for about a year and a quarter. And it ended up at the end where I was taking about 20 Oxycontins a day. So it was about 400 milligrams, which is a lot of Oxycontin. That would probably a quarter of that would kill me right now. But I knew the problem was bad because I was taking my monthly dose in 2 weeks. And I was talking with my primary care physician that I want to get off, and we had a plan to go down 10% a month, but I couldn't do it, or at least I didn't think I could at the time. My ex-wife was getting very upset at me too and saying I had a problem and she was going to leave me. And so it was all lining up that it was problematic. So I cold turkeyed it. And that's not a good way to go about it, especially when you're going with such high doses, because I was in the ER 48 hours later being wheeled in for sure thinking I'm dying, right? So they give me a shot of Dilaudid. I all of a sudden feel better right away. And I have a realization that I'm not dying. I'm sick from these drugs. Like, if they can give me one shot and I can feel instantaneously better, then it's the drugs. I'm just not dying. So I cold turkeyed from that point on, and I recovered. And over the next month, I gained 25 pounds, and I was able to get off it was a very, very, very hard recovery. I couldn't get off my floor for the first week. It's straight out of the movies. It was like, I was sick. I was shaking. I was sweating. It was miserable. Like, if I had anything just to shut the lights out and say it's all over, I would have done that. It was very hard. So getting through that, Then I thought that getting back to my prior life, because I wanted to be somewhat normal. And normal in my eyes was not so skinny and going out socially, having drinks and going out to events. So I got back to drinking alcohol. So thinking that I could handle drinking the alcohol. Well, that was just a replacement for the pain med. Little did I know that you just substitute one for the other. So the alcohol became so problematic that I would get home and I would just, not out in public, but I was drinking way too much at home, and I had a little daughter who was 4 or 5 years old, and it was just ridiculous what I was doing. So I was killing myself when I had fought so hard to live. So I checked myself into my first of 2 rehabs, and right before Christmas, and I made it 2 weeks, and then I felt great. I thought everything was okay, and I asked the head of the place, "Do I need to be in here?" And he said, "No, as long as you don't drink, you don't need to be in here." So I'm like, "Well, then I'm out of here." So I left. Well, 2 weeks later, I'm like, I'm fixed. I'll have another drink over New Year's. Well, that was just back on that, and it just got worse after that. So May 2nd, 8 years ago, I went in. I begged my wife to take me into rehab again. She said, "Screw you. We're done. I'm over you. You're going on your own." She ended up driving me there, and that was our last day together as husband and wife, because she filed for divorce paperwork while I was in custody paperwork while I was in that rehab for 30 days. So I go to that rehab, and the stories you hear in there of meth addicts and opiate addicts, and how many people I know that are dead now that were in there. It's just a lot. I'm still friends with a handful of people from there, but I am a success story from that, because I followed the rules. I gave up, followed the rules, what I was supposed to do. I went to 200 AA meetings after I got out of that 30 days. I lived in sober living for 6 months, which was embarrassing to me at the time, but I put in a lot of work to get sober. And now I've been sober for 8.5 years. So,
So,
things can turn around.
absolutely. So just so I understand clearly, and for everyone, of course, you were taking the pain medications and you became addicted to those. Was the underlying pain still there?
That's what I thought, because when you have an acute pain like my broken rib, that pain, broken bone, broken rib, you take the pain meds, you've got that pain, but that heals eventually. So when that heals, where's this pain coming from? In my mind, the pain was all over. It was intestines, I couldn't move. It was there. It was chronic pain. So I developed chronic pain that was there. I felt pain. I would have, under a lie detector, I would have passed that I was in actual pain. But the reality is, and that's the hard thing that I have to deal with when communicating with other people who are taking these drugs. Like, they will tell you with all, they believe what they're saying, that they need these things or else they will be in pain and they will hurt. And I did. If I stopped taking them, I'd be sick. I'd have the shakes and the pain would come back. The physical pain would be there. But my belief is that once I got past a certain period, I didn't need those pain meds. I needed to get off of them somehow in a different way, and I would have recovered much easier instead of having to fall off a cliff and do this. But yeah, the pain was in my mind, and I did feel it, but I don't think I needed it after a certain amount of time.
Sure. And so by the time you had transitioned the swap to alcohol, would you say that the underlying pain was there, or again in your mind as well?
It was gone. Yeah, the underlying pain was gone. This was more of a transition to try to get back to some sense of normalcy with what everyone else was doing, going out and having wine at dinner or whatever it was, and all of a sudden I would just have multiple glasses of wine instead of just one, because I processed it very fast. It would go in me and out me really quickly. And, because without having the stomach to hold the wine or hold the alcohol, whatever it is, it just went straight to my small intestine, and I could have a sip and feel it really fast, and then it would leave me. So then I could just continue drinking. So it's just a different plumbing that I had that was effective, got me buzzed fast, but, the problems just accelerated pretty quickly.
Sure. I'm struck by the human element in all of this in your journey. I'm struck by a personal loss, right? Your health impacted your relationship, which literally led to a very negative outcome, certainly at the time. And I know in hindsight, we can look at life and say things are better now.
Yeah.
But it was a very rough time for your ex-wife and you,
Yes.
and for your daughter. Could you talk about how your relationships were impacted and how you found new relationships to help you through?
Yeah, the relationship, I think, with my ex-wife, when I got so sick and the odds were so grim, I think a wall just went up and she had to protect herself. And the thought of me dying was just a very, very, very difficult thing. And to be then I think in her mind was going to be a single mother of a little child. It was overwhelming. So that took away the closeness and support, I think, from the two of us. Our intimacy stopped. We just became kind of two people cruising together instead of two partners in life with a child. And so that was the beginning. And then when I was, I think in my book, I said that I had the house, the car, the vacation home, the child, but I was as lonely as I've ever been in this house. Like I didn't have anything. It was like my daughter and ex-wife would be together and I would be by myself in this house. And I'm going, what kind of life do I have? This was not a life. So I didn't know what she was going through at the time. And I have more understanding after the fact of how hard it is to be a caregiver of someone. And I would hate to see my current wife now go through anything near what I went through. It would be devastating. So it's a hard process. But in all this process, while I was in sober living, I reconnected with my high school first. And she and I dated for many years and got married. And so she was my first and my last. I'm now remarried. And I'm as happy as I've ever been. My daughter is 14 years old. She's about to turn 15 next week. And I've got to see her get to high school. I was never able to have children after because of all the chemo and radiation. So I have a stepson that I was never able to have. That's 15 years old. And even though I do still have ongoing things that are byproducts of the surgeries that are causing challenges, I am as good as I've ever been at being in my 50s, and which is crazy to say. How does that happen after all this? And so I have a connection with my children and my wife. My ex-wife doesn't hate me anymore like she used to. She just lives down the street, and life is really good. And I don't know how I could have got here without going through what I did, but I somehow kept a shine on all of this. And that's the key, I think, is kind of keeping a light and keeping a shine and just keeping that energy that is positive. Because it's not all positive. I mean, I share things that it's still tough, but.
First of all, thank you so much. Your openness throughout this conversation has been incredible. I can clearly see that you have come to an amazing place in your life. And I'm so inspired by what you now do, right? You take that, and I, there's a Latin saying, experientia docet. The full saying is, experience purchased through suffering teaches. And that's what you have had to go through, and unfortunately had to go through. But now you're using your new sense of life and the path that you have to share your journey with others, which is inspiring, to be a part of the Debbie's Dream Foundation and the Gastric Cancer Foundation, and share your story in the book that you have. If you could flash it back up, that would be wonderful.
All right.
So
Killer Graces.
Killer Graces.
Yep, that's me. It was named after my first racehorse that I used as inspiration to kind of enjoy life. And Killer Graces just kind of fit in the line of all those killer things that I was hit, but end up being graces in the end.
Wonderful. Steve, is there any final words that you would have to share with others? You mentioned the shine. You mentioned looking forward to what happens beyond. You mentioned that your life is so much better now than it ever was. What else do you tell folks?
What I would say is that we are stronger than we believe we are. We can handle more than we think we can. Life, everyone has challenges out there. Your challenges are no less significant than someone else's. I share my story because it happened to be a big one, And if it can somehow help someone else get through whatever challenge they have, you need to not lose that light. I personally was in a period of my life where my future was dark. I couldn't see anything going forward. I didn't see a future. And so I get that. My life now, I see colors. I see a future. I see these things. And what's really helped me is being able to give something and give a bit back to people, because I get rewarded. My reward is talking to you today. And if anyone else reads this, like, that's my reward in life. You know, this is not a paid for thing that I'm doing. This is because I think I get so many comments from people around the country that they say, you know, I can relate. And no one else talked about that. And you know what? There's a lot of stories like this out there. And if I can just be one that can help someone get through their day and then pass it on to someone else, you'd be amazed at what that gift of giving does for yourself. So I grow every day because of the feedback that I get. And that's what I would just want to finish with.
I couldn't agree more. Steve, it's been an absolute joy to meet you, to connect with you, to share in your humanity and your journey. And I wish you a great rest of your day and enjoy the weekend ahead. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you and the time you shared today.
Well, thank you for your time. It's wonderful.
Thank you. And it takes me a few weeks to edit videos, but as soon as it is, I will send it out and you'll have the link. And
well, thank you. I like your calming spirit, and I wish you luck in the adoption process. I know that is it's very challenging. And in my book, the whole adoption thing, I got my biological mom and dad together like 7 years ago, and that was a wild one. Sitting down, seeing both their faces for the first time. So adoption is an interesting, you know, side story to it all. That's why I threw it in the book. But I wish you best of luck in that process.
I'm going to buy the book. I'm going to check it out. So thank you so much, Steve. Take care and I look forward to staying in touch as well.
Absolutely. Okay, sounds wonderful. Thank you, Manny.
Bye-bye.
Bye.